Welcome to One Bills Lite, the starter plate version of our daily show, One Bills Live, as we cram just about all you can handle inside 40 minutes. On today's episode, we address just how much addition by subtraction the Bills have to undertake to get to a place where they feel they can conduct business effectively on the free agent market. We talk with former NFL defensive end Chris Long about Buffalo as a destination for his unretired brother Kyle Long, and we ask the question, should we be concerned? Let's roll it out!
Tasker, touchdown, Buffalo. And it's Steve Tasker who has been all over the field.
Kind of unique. He was kind of a dual-role player for you. Steve!
A balloon.
Steve! A blimp? We're not even in the stratosphere of normalcy here. Thanks for joining us here on One Bills Lite. Glad to have you listening on any of your podcast platforms or listening and watching on the Bills YouTube channel. Chris Brown, Steve Tasker with you as always. And Steve, we witnessed firsthand the hard decisions Bills GM Brandon Beane and several other general managers around the league are faced with this offseason with this restrictive salary cap. Buffalo releasing John Brown and Quentin Jefferson earlier this week to save upwards of $14 million on the cap, create more space, but in doing so, they increased the number of free agents coming off their roster from 14 to 16. There are now more holes to fill. How do they pull it off?
Yeah, they're going to have to really do some smart shopping. Certainly, they've got to fill their roster out, and there's not going to be too much of a problem doing that. You got to set aside about $10 million of salary cap space for their rookie class, their draft class. Mm-hmm. They've got 7 picks, and you got to allot $660,000 per pick, and so there's your. There it is. It's a little over $7 million they got to have. Plus, they got the cash to spend them in, put them in bonuses and prorate whatever that is over the course of those contracts. So about $10 million overall. They've still got work to do. And as we said, losing John Brown, losing Quentin Jefferson, along with Feliciano, Darrell Williams not in the fold, Levi Wallace is out the door, Matt Milano, of course, is the biggest name that people are talking about. Ike Butker, offensive line. Your linebacking core. The Bills have some holes to fill from guys who were real contributors in a 15-win season last year. As it sits now at this point of the offseason, we talked about it on the show, Brownie. This team, as it's constituted right this minute, couldn't beat the team they were 3 months ago.
Yeah.
So they've got work to do.
Yeah.
And there's no saying they can't get there, but they've got to spend their money extremely wisely in a market that is going to be both flooded with great players, but on the other hand, there's going to be a lot of teams with a lot of money to spend to drive the prices up, perhaps out of the Bills' price range.
Yeah, first, let me thank you for bringing us all into a state of dismay as to the current state of the roster in comparison to last season. I mean, you pointed that out on our One Bills Live show earlier this week, and I was like, man alive, he's right. Oh, God, what is going on? But I think you have to look at it on the flip side and also say the amount of talent that is going to be out there to choose from should be better than most years because everyone is doing this to a great degree across the league. Right. And there are household names that are going to be out there, and they're not going to be able to command the same market value that they have in years past because teams don't have the money to spend necessarily. Unless they make so many cuts, they put themselves in a cap space situation that allows them to do that. But I tell you, you make 1 or 2 big free agent signings, all that space you just created is gobbled up. And that's why I think bargain shopping has to kind of be the model for the Bills going forward. Not necessarily as much from a cap space standpoint, but from a numbers standpoint, pure volume of what you have to add back onto the roster necessitates that they spend wisely and not get fiscally irresponsible chasing some big-name free agent.
They have to find 4 solid NFL-caliber starters that will replace the guys who helped them win 15 games last year. 4 of them, 5 of them. You got a second corner, a linebacker from Milano, 3 offensive linemen. That's 5 guys.
And a third wideout.
And a third wideout. Now, the wideout.
Who might be on your roster.
The wideout guys might be already here. I mean, you've got a deep set room of wide receivers, all of whom contributed last year. But Isaiah McKenzie's not here.
And neither is Andre Roberts.
Andre Roberts is not here. That's a Pro Bowl player.
And now John Brown is not. So that's
Andre
half
Roberts
of your
is a
wide
Pro
receiver
Bowl
room.
caliber player.
That's half your wide receiver room, and we'll get into that later in the show.
They've got some holes to fill.
Yeah.
Big time.
We shouldn't forget that the Bills have the option bonuses on the contract extensions signed by Deion Dawkins and Tre'Davious White last year that they can exercise on any one of the first 5 days of the new league year. So from March 17th to, what is that, March 21st, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21. Yes, from March 17th to March 21st, they can exercise their option bonuses on, or their option years on those contracts, which would kick in the final year, which for Tre'Davious White's 2025, for Deion Dawkins it's 2024, and that can get them an additional $15 million in space on this year's cap by triggering the Bills' commitment to the final year of each of those deals. Essentially takes half of their base salaries this year and spreads it over the life of the contract. That seems like a no-brainer, right?
Right.
Because those guys are going to be here anyway. They're cornerstone players. What the hell's the difference if you cement their final year of their respective extensions?
Yeah, give them the money now. Half their salary, this year's salary, they'd get it right now as a bonus. And then they cut their cap hit in half on big deals. The 2 extensions they signed, Deion Dawkins and Tre'Davious White. So that'll give you an extra $15 million and not change any numbers on your roster, your players.
Yeah,
you still got those great players in there, but they do give you $15 million. You gotta cough up the money. Thanks very much. But you can make that move if you're financially free to do so.
Yeah, because I remember we had Joel Corey, a former NFL agent, now works for CBS Sports, on the show, and he said that those kinds of contracts went out of style about 8 or 9 years ago, but they've come back in vogue because of this restrictive cap. A lot of teams that signed players to extensions during the course of last season after the pandemic had fully hit and people were recognizing the potential impact, said this might be a way to get out from under some restrictive cap situations in the spring. Let's structure the deal this way. And fortunately, the Bills did just that with both the Deion Dawkins deal and the Tre'Davious White deal. So if you take the $19 million in room approximately that the Bills created with the Mitch Morse restructure, the Vernon Butler restructure, the release of Brown, and the release of Jefferson, you take that $19 million and then you add the $15 million that you can approximately get by picking up the option years for Tre'Davious White and Deion Dawkins the first day of the new league year. Now you're sitting at $34 million in room. You can get some things done there.
Right. Exactly. And that gives you some breathing room. And you say, okay, now we're going to get there. Now it's a question of getting the right guys. Mm-hmm. It's not about we can't buy a scrub player right now. Now you can. Now you can get some pretty good players, and you can go out and fill your roster out and get to training camp with some guys who can actually take the field for you in September.
Time now for this week's edition of the Numbers Game. We play this every week. We put Steve to the task, and this week we take a look at Buffalo's pass rush, which has already undergone a degree of change with the release of Quentin Jefferson. Steve, I need you to name me this week the top 5 players on Buffalo's roster in 2020 for quarterback hits. We know that the leading sacker was Jerry Hughes. I think Mario Addison was right there too. A.J. Klein was there as well in terms of sacks. But this is very often an overlooked stat, so hopefully you haven't paid too close attention to the quarterback hit tally. So
I have not.
When it came to quarterback hits, Steve, give me who you think finished in the top 5 for Buffalo in 2020.
With hits,
quarterback hits,
I would
top
say
5.
Jerry Hughes.
Jerry Hughes is number 1 with 11.
I would say Ed Oliver.
Ed Oliver is just outside the top 5. He's tied for 6th.
Tremaine Edmonds.
Tremaine Edmonds is not on the list, sir.
Matt Milano.
Matt Milano tied for 2nd with 9.
All right. 9. Okay, 9. I'll say A.J. Klein then.
A.J. Klein tied with Milano.
Okay.
So you've got the top 3 right now. Jerry Hughes with 11, Klein and Milano tied at 9. You have 2 left.
Jordan Poyer.
Not Jordan.
I'm going to say Mario Addison.
Mario Addison is correct. He is 4th with 8.
Okay.
So you've got the last member of the quarterback hit top 5 for the Bills in 2020. And who might that be, Steve?
It is Vernon Butler.
It is not Vernon Butler. No, I'm sorry.
Trent Murphy.
It is not Trent Murphy. He, believe it or not, Trent Murphy didn't play a whole lot last year, as we know.
Right.
Still tied with Ed Oliver and Quentin Jefferson for 6th with quarterback hits with 6.
When he played, he got a lot of snaps. I'll say A.J. Epinesa.
It is not A.J. Epinesa. I don't think he played enough.
Bam Johnson.
It is not Bam Johnson. I know he's a favorite of yours, but he is not.
Willikers. Now I'm running out of names.
I know.
Micah.
It is not Micah. This guy is the reason I put this list together. To bring attention.
Tre'Davious.
It is not Tre'Davious. To bring attention to this fact. Because I was surprised to see it myself.
All right.
And I think, I'll put it to you this way. This is an underrated player that I still don't think gets the respect.
Dane Jackson.
It is not Dane Jackson. For what he is, oh boy, you just
Dane
went.
Jackson is, you have a man crush
Yeah,
on
my
Dane
bromance
Jackson.
with Dane
All right.
Jackson.
I will say Taron Johnson.
Not Taron Johnson. Nope. It is not a defensive back. It is not a linebacker.
Harrison Phillips.
It is not Harrison Phillips.
Justin Zimmer.
It is Justin Zimmer, Steve Tasker. How about that? Justin Zimmer, 5th on the
I
team
tell you what.
in quarterback hits with 7. We saw him on the GPS next-gen stats hitting 18 miles per hour, chasing after Tyreek Hill.
Tyreek Hill mentioned it.
Yeah.
I'll tell you this. Here's my call.
Justin Zimmer,
Steve. Right
Steve.
now. I'm calling it right now. Justin Zimmer is going to have an expanded role on the Buffalo Bills in coming year. And I think, here's my hot take. Justin Zimmer is going to get offensive snaps this year.
Offensive snaps.
Yes.
What, as a fullback?
Yeah.
Wow. Little goal line action.
I think
They don't have a fullback.
I think he's going to get
new
offensive
the
snaps.
Patrick Ricard
He is
of the Buffalo Bills.
He is too fast.
He's really he can
not
move.
to use that speed in some way, shape, or form.
I like 18 miles per hour going straight ahead into the hole to lead your running back through
Punching
there.
punching the ball out on Cam Newton.
Yep.
He's just he's
Justin Zimmer.
He's too athletic not to start using that versatility. So he is going to have. That's my hot take. He'll probably get cut, but that's my hot take.
Well, I mean,
Justin Zimmer is going to get offensive snaps and have an expanded.
I
role
love
this
it.
Season.
I love it. Mark it down.
Write that down.
One Bills Lite, episode 20. Steve Tasker says Justin Zimmer will get offensive snaps in 2021. All right, good job, Steve.
Thank you.
Time now for our guest this week. It is former NFL defensive end and 2-time Super Bowl champ, Chris Long. Currently the host of the Green Light podcast. And, wow, he's got the color scheme working behind him, too, there. Wow, look at this. But, yeah, Chris Long joining us, former NFL defensive end, 2-time Super Bowl champ with the Patriots and Eagles. Chris, thank you for taking some time. We appreciate it. How you guys doing during this pandemic? Everybody healthy in the family? Oop, I think we're having trouble hearing Chris. Hold on a quick second here, Chris. We're going to see if we can.
Sorry, there you go. Hey,
There we go. All right. Unmute. There we go. Beautiful.
It's still kind of my rookie year here. I got to turn the microphone off. Just blessed, man. Really, really lucky. I live in Charlottesville, Virginia, so a smaller town. So we haven't really. It's a college town. They've done a good job. But I got 2 young kids. I have the flexibility to stay home, and I podcast for a living. So life is good. I'm just thinking about other people out there and hoping they're doing all right.
Yeah, and as this off-season kind of winds up, are you surprised at the stuff going on? I mean, we could see it coming down the road. Tons of transactions, guys getting cut, guys getting restructured, and then you see a mega deal get done with Dak. I mean, it's all over the map right now. And I know you. I played with your dad.
Yeah. Yes,
the
sir.
league, for what we used to go through, it used to move like a glacier, and now stuff happens. Man, it happens like an avalanche every offseason. is this a surprise to you, or is there anything surprising about the Dak deal in this kind of climate?
Well, first off, Steve, big fan. And so nice to talk to you. And then also, I think this, my second offseason into this thing in the media or whatever you want to call it, it's almost like all the rules you started to learn about free agency and the cap and that sort of thing. Because as a player, you pay attention, but you don't when, to the degree that you have to when you have a podcast or whatever. So, the cap going down, the uncertainty there, Dak's contract, that whole saga was so it felt unprecedented. You got this player that kind of bet on himself and won, and the worst possible thing that could have happened to him happened, right? So, it's just a very interesting turn of events. And I think what makes it great is as players, we're always rooting for players, but when you're rooting for somebody like Dak, who I think objectively any former player, any player would tell you, we could argue about whether he's a top 5 quarterback, that sort of thing, but you're paying for a lot of what you're paying for there is the quality of human being. And the crazy circus that Dallas is, having a guy under center there that can kind of handle that, he's got it. The X and O's, we'll see if he gets the money's worth out of it. But guys like Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson are looking at this deal and they're pretty excited.
Yeah. And mentioning franchise quarterbacks as you did, the Bills now have one in Josh Allen, as you well know. But I want to get your player perspective on this aspect of it, because when teams are searching for a franchise quarterback, it's all consuming in terms of the roster construct. And you're obsessed with it until you have one on your roster. But then the dynamics change when you have one in terms of how you build the roster around that player, because there's a defined direction with that guy and his respective skill set. But from a player perspective, knowing the years that you spent in St. Louis, yes, they tried to draft a franchise guy in Sam Bradford, mixed success, due more to injury.
Couldn't stay healthy.
Yeah. So as you got to the end of your time in St. Louis and finally became a free agent, how imperative was it for you to find a team with a proven franchise quarterback? Because I mean, the GMs deal with it in their way. I'm curious how players like you, veteran players looking to win, deal with it in your way in free agency.
Yeah, it's tough. Listen, I was very lucky in St. Louis, made a lot of money and had individual success, but I always felt empty. And I didn't know any other way. Like, my reality in the NFL was come home and, it's a foregone conclusion. You probably lost. You wake up in the morning on Sunday morning, you're like, put your big boy pants on. You're going to be able to, you got to take care of yourself and control what you can control. It was almost like a shock going to winning cultures and like just watching the offense and just assuming that things are going to work out. Like, this is going to be a 10-play drive. 3rd and 8, they're going to convert. Like, that felt so foreign to me because we could never land a quarterback for a long period of time. And Sam, you heard Kyle Rudolph's comments recently that kind of probably made some people's eyebrows raise. Sam would have, catapulted them in the Super Bowl or whatever. I disagree, and Sam's one of my best friends. That's because we would have kicked their ass just like we did in the playoffs. But I do think that had Sam gotten healthy, we'd have had more success. Now, to your point, you cannot win without one. And I think that's why every team has to look at when they draft in the top 10, top 15, what do we do? If we already think we have one, do we really have like the guy of the future? Kyler Murray, that deal with Josh Rosen, that's going to pop up more now. Like, when I came in the league, the old CBA, a Sam Bradford, good luck. Like, that's who you're stuck with, or whoever gets drafted in the top 5. Now there's more wiggle room. So I think that every team has to look at that every offseason. And when I was done in St. Louis, I just sold out to win. Yeah. And I was basically a good handicapper for 2-3 years.
Yeah, because you're like the perfect example. I mean, you go play with Brady, you win there, you go, and then you even go to Philly and you win there. Not maybe under the circumstances of a true franchise quarterback, since Nick had to finish it off for you guys. But, I mean, was it imperative for you? Like, I'm going somewhere where they have a rock-solid QB where, we got a chance to win something here because I'm running out of years.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, like, it's funny because I was a little older when I got in the league, so I was maybe 23. So my 8 years was like, okay, time's ticking. I'm 31 now. I've never hit the market. They read me up a year early in St. Louis off a 13-sack year, so I never had the time to, like, really consider other options. And for me, it came down to Atlanta and New England. And those are the two teams that played in the Super Bowl. So, I went down to Atlanta and met with Dan Quinn, and I love Dan Quinn. The only thing I didn't like about Atlanta was the damn facility is in Louisiana, or I don't even know if Louisiana borders Georgia, but
It doesn't.
the thing is far. Flowery Branch is
Flowery
far.
Branch is out.
Yeah.
It's further
out.
than Orchard Park, from Buffalo,
Yeah. Now, there was that, and then like Dan, when I was meeting with him, like it almost gotten to the end of the meeting, and he's like, I love your game, I love your versatility, I want you to be our Michael Bennett. And in my head, all I heard was like 4-eye, 3 technique, 4-eye, 3 technique, rushing inside. And coincidentally, I played more in a 3 in New England than I ever bargained for. But I just felt like the thing that pushed me over the edge was Tom Brady. And nothing against Matt Ryan, nothing against Dan Quinn, but Tom and Bill. And, at that point, it's different in basketball. If you ring chase, like it can be a little cheap. But in football, it's a crapshoot. Tell me who's going to win the Super Bowl next year. You don't know.
Yeah.
Even in the Patriots dynasty years, they went like a decade between Super Bowls. And if it weren't for Malcolm Butler, it'd have been even longer.
Right. And that's one of the things here in Buffalo where they get to the AFC Championship and they run into the Chiefs. And right after that game, and it's a little bit reactionary, no question. Everybody kind of goes through this where if we would have done this and this, or if we had this type of player in this spot, we would have gone to the Super Bowl this year. So they become obsessed with molding their franchise to beat a single team like the Chiefs. And like a lot of people talked about beating the Patriots in those years and Tom Brady and all of that. But the real question for me, and I've said this on our show a ton, when you're good enough to get to the AFC Championship game, the last 4 or 5 or 6 teams in it in each conference, if they play well on that game that weekend, they could go the distance. I mean, they could go. They're good enough to play well to beat any of those teams. And the Bills run into a Chiefs team that played extremely well, maybe their best game in the second half of the season, that game. They played them, and they couldn't beat them because the Chiefs played well. But it's not something that you need to chase some magic elixir to put you over the hump to get to the Super Bowl. You need to make your team as good as it can be, and that should be enough if you play well on that day.
I think you put your blinders on and you retool your team the way you think your team needs to improve. You don't try to contrive some. Now, I'm not a GM, okay? I'm not but I'm just telling you, I've been a player where, and this is like after years, they overthink themselves. Like coaches, front office people, they overthink. And, I've been on Super Bowl teams where you come back the next year and like, I felt like, we did a little too much, or we tried to do too much to retool or reinvent the wheel. When you really don't need to reinvent the wheel, you need to add the pieces that can take you to the next level. Like, what are your weaknesses? Like, okay, for Buffalo, you saw that everybody knows, like, you wish you had a double-digit sack guy, like a dominant rusher. I love Jerry Hughes. Jerry Hughes is one of my favorite players, like so underrated, pressures, hits, like disrupting the game. If you added one more rusher, and I like Mario Addison, but I think they probably miss one dominant dude, whether it's, an inside guy to pair with your young draft pick. Mahomes, if you want to beat Mahomes, and people thought this was cliche, you got to be able to hit him. And of course, you're never going to get the O-line in that shape again, as the Buccaneers got him. But there's a lot of things, to your point, Steve, in that game. Now, they handily beat y'all, but there were different intersections in the first half where if it went this way or we did this, we're at least in the game later. And that game in the rain, it didn't seem as lopsided. So I think there is like a degree of, if you're in division with somebody, you're going to play them twice a year, you make moves to stop this guy.
Right.
Like Arizona drafting the kid from Clemson, to me, that screamed, okay, we got somebody for George Kittle. And the same thing with Jamal Adams going to Seattle. Like you're trying to match strength for strength. But if you're worried about the Chiefs, man, just get as good as you can be, right? To your point.
Yeah. Right. Speaking of trying to add to your roster, your brother just recently tweeted that he's coming out of retirement. So knowing how well you are at handicapping where to go in free agency to win a ring, I wonder if you might be able to exact some undue influence on Kyle on our behalf, knowing that the Bills have 5 offensive linemen whose contracts are up this offseason. I'm just throwing it out there.
Well, it's funny because we just broke that, and it tickled me to death that Adam Schefter had to quote tweet my co-host. So shout out to Adam Schefter for sharing it. So Kyle gave us the scoop, and I'm excited for him. I'm a little bit terrified for him because pro football is it's not easy to just stop and then pick back up. But he's a freak, man. He'll be fine. Buffalo should be in the mix, man, for the factors you just mentioned, but I'm not his agent. I'm not Kyle. I can't think for him. I can tell you though, I've always my whole career thought y'all had a really cool thing going up there, and now you guys are good. Who wouldn't want to play in Buffalo? It's just something about it. The fans and the tradition and the stadium. I love how small and intimate it is. And you walk in there, you feel like it's a college atmosphere. I was jealous, when I go up there and play. So he should definitely consider Buffalo. And you guys do need offensive linemen. Right before I popped on, I was like, look what we just broke. Maybe they'll ask me about Kyle.
Yeah, we had to. And it's interesting because we've been harping on this, and you know how, and it kills me when people in our end of it now, out here in the media, talk about, and the Bills, they don't run it well. So guys, just get a better running back. And they don't even look that they have 4 offensive linemen that are free agents. And they got another one that's a restricted free agent. They got 3 guys that were their starting 5 that aren't even under contract now, but they're talking about running backs. It's nuts to me. And in a year like this, with Kyle coming back into the mix, there's no question there's going to be a market for his services.
Yeah.
And I've said that both these, for the Bills to get back to where they were, they've got to do it up front on both sides of the ball.
You're absolutely right. I mean, when you think about the Bills, when I was in the league, I thought about rushers. I thought about guys up front. I thought about road grading kind of offensive linemen, whether it was Richie or Eric Wood or even Glenn, some of his better years. That's an identity. It's cold weather football. It's you got to build up front, man. And I think it's kind of short-sighted to just think we'll fix it with a running back, because as it's been driven home over and over again, and I'm not knocking running backs, it's just they're a little bit more interchangeable than offensive lines, in my opinion. And, look at it like an Aaron Jones, buyer beware. He's a great player. He's probably going to make you happy no matter where he ends up. I haven't followed the news if there's any lean on where he's going or whatever. But a guy like that, okay, you're playing with Aaron Rodgers, Devontae Adams, you've got a dynamic play caller, you have a solid O-line until they had some injuries or whatever. But what does that project to somewhere else? And I think you're wiser to start with the offensive line.
Talking with former NFL defensive lineman Chris Long, also host of the Green Lite podcast. And we should also mention this, a former Walter Payton Man of the Year as well. And I know you're still active with your community endeavors, whether it's your foundation, serving for bright futures for communities, or your Waterboys project in East Africa. What is the status of those things? And maybe just speak to how your involvement may have morphed and changed now that you don't have to worry about getting to an NFL facility at 7 a.m. and leaving at 6 p.m, 6 days a week for 7-8 months.
Well, it's funny because I've said this, whether it was the media or just being okay with walking away from the game. If you'd have told me there was going to be a pandemic right as I got out of the league, I was I wouldn't have lasted. I wouldn't have known what to do with myself. And so the same thing with the foundation, it's hard when you leave the game, because if you're smart as a player, people don't really care. People know who you are. They like to give you a hug if they see you at a bar. They want your autograph. But people don't get behind your stuff the same way. Now we have some really core, fanatical Chris Long Foundation, Waterboys supporters. They'll always be there. But going out and getting those new people is hard when you don't have a jersey on anymore. So one of the biggest things is we pass this off to an active captain. I'm still grinding. I'm still, the CEO behind the scenes. I'm still engaging with retired athletes. But when it comes to fundraising as an active player, we needed some people that could step up. And so I got Myles Garrett to go with us this past year. And obviously with everything that happened to him, this was in the word that he did and that happened to him, to be fair. It was one of those things where I saw – it was already in the works. We picked Myles Garrett, and then the helmet thing happened, and I was like, oh no. Like, what are we going to do? Well, I believe in people second chances, and I believe in people, rebuilding themselves. And I believe Miles is a good kid. And it was never, I didn't flinch, and we didn't flinch. And we thought, this is the guy we want leading us in the future. He's a good kid. He had a terrible moment, and he's got to fix that, and he's got to make amends for that. And I think this work allows him to help do that, and it helps us remain relevant. And we're gaining new players all the time. So we do large solar powered wells in East Africa. We're closing in on 500,000 people serviced. We've done almost 100 large wells. We also do domestic work. So we might have a project outside Buffalo at some point. A lot of people in the United States do not have access to clean water. And it's not just the Flints. It's single family homes, it's communities, it's small rural towns. So some places near my hometown in Virginia, they don't have water. So we're trying to get in there. Navajo Nation, if you're an indigenous person in this country, you have 17 times the chance of not having clean water as somebody like the dudes on this podcast that look like us. So there's all types of in the water space inequities and things we can address, and we can address them here and in places like East Africa. So waterboys.org. We also launched Water for Her, International Women's Day. We rolled out a bunch of great influencers there because it is a women's issue. All the burden falls on women and girls gathering unclean and clean water.
And I know that you've been a huge part of this. So, you've been recognized by the NFL for it. And I want to speak to you because I say this once in a while on our show and mostly in passing, that the NFL and certainly you hear about guys who struggle or can't handle the fame and fortune and who aren't great guys. But it's been my experience, and you played on a lot more teams. I played on 2 different teams, and I know that you played on more than that and played for a long time as well. The league is really populated by pretty quality people from top to bottom. And I think that gets lost in the headlines and the social media and the outrage that you hear about this, that, and the other, some slight or the disrespect or players showboat, whatever.
Yeah.
I'm a big proponent of what the NFL is and what it stands for and the guys who populate it at every level. And certainly it has its issues, but they embrace those issues more openly than I think any other entity in the U.S.
I agree. I mean, like the Shield, the league, front offices, owners, I can't speak to all that all the time. But I can tell you about the men that I played with. And, I know you feel the same way, Steve, is to ascend to that level. I don't think people understand that you can't just be talented. There are some guys who are just talented, but the intellectual acumen it takes to master a playbook, the regimented kind of routine from dieting to fitness to exercise to taking care of your body it is a 365-day-a-year job. And there are some really responsible, great men in our league. And it came down to the other day, I was picking board members for my foundation, and we're in the process of that right now. And I said, there's one guy that I would trust with my children that I know outside my family if I had to leave for a week. It's a guy like Matthew Slater. Well, that's a lie because there's probably 5 guys I played with like that. But I had to have Matthew Slater on my board. And there are so many guys like Matthew Slater who people in Buffalo probably don't like as much. Right. But guys like that who don't make the news because they're never bad news guys, and bad news sells. And so I think the countless guys that you're referring to that I played with never get the same shine. And I got lucky, Walter Payton Man of the Year and all that stuff. I almost felt guilty getting that award because I know there's better guys than me in the league. I'm an okay guy. We've been very productive off the field. I'll just say that. And so there are just so many quality people in the NFL, but to your point, it doesn't make the news when people do good things, and that sucks. And I hate that, but it's the reality. And we take it on the chin all the time. We do. We're all bad people. If you look at a lot of the statistics for rates that we get in trouble and that sort of thing, they don't reflect the general population. And in fact, all the bad news about what's going to happen to you after football it's people feed on that, and it's to the point where when you retire, if I read what's supposed to happen to me as a former football player who played 11 years in the league in the trenches, I'm going to lose my mind and I'm going to be a terrible, degenerate, member of society and that sort of thing. There's guys like my dad, there's guys like you that are leading positive, awesome lives after football. And so I think like from the quality of the men that we played with to, what's the next chapter like, we need to recalibrate that conversation because there's a lot of really awesome dudes that play in our league who are set for life after financially, but also as people.
Last one for me, Chris, and we're going to end this on a much lighter note, but it's been a great conversation because I've got to get the answer to this. So you were just talking about shine and everything, and I can't help but think of all the shine that the Manning family gets in the NFL, and the shine for the Long family is woefully behind in terms of that. So I'm always curious, and I know you're not a self-glosser at all, but do you stop and think sometimes when you see all the shine that 3 quarterbacks get in comparison to a couple of defensive linemen and an offensive lineman in the Long family?
Well, it's hard because, it's like there's also the Bosas, and the Bosas, the second generation is better than our second generation if they play this out. Like, the accolades, and there's nobody, in my opinion, down 4-3 end that's as dominant as Joey Bosa in the game right now, in my opinion, like that I enjoy watching down in and down out. I think they should be in the conversation. The Kelseys, you got 2 all pros. Mm-hmm. The Mannings, they're quarterbacks. Quarterbacks always get the credit. Like me and my brother, like, I was a real good player. My brother's a real good player. Dad's a Hall of Famer, but we'd have to be riding Dad's coattails pretty hard. He's got the gold jacket, right? Yeah. I think the Mannings own that title and they're quarterbacks. They can have it.
All right. Fair enough. Chris, really good conversation. We appreciate the time. Good luck with the Green Light broadcast and all the good stuff you're doing out community-wise. We'll keep an eye out for some of those endeavors, especially that the reservation stuff with the Native American community. We got a lot of Native American population up here in Western New York, so that is a startling statistic just about the clean drinking water. It's, that you enlightened me.
It'll blow your mind. Yeah, it'll blow your mind. But it was great talking to you guys, and I love watching the Bills, man. That's one of my side teams. I put it that way. I watch the Bills, and I'm like a closet Bills fan.
All right, fair enough.
Chris.
Thanks for the time again, Chris. We appreciate it.
Take it easy.
All right, Steve, we close up this week's episode with the question, should we be concerned? The release of John Brown this week has left the Bills without a veteran deep threat. They may not add at that position in free agency, although I tend to think they will in some way, shape, or form. They may re-sign Isaiah McKenzie, but beyond Stephon Diggs and Cole Beasley, they have Gabriel Davis, Isaiah Hodgins, as well as Jake Kummerow, who flashed last season. We know Duke Williams is still on the roster, but he's had a hard time getting up on the 53, as we know. The question here is, can you make up the 4.3 receptions per game, 63 receiving yards per game, and 4.5 touchdowns per season that John Brown gave this offense the past 2 years on average? I
think you can. And I'm not going to say that I don't like John Brown. We all like John Brown. He was a great player. He was here for 2 full seasons, and really, I think he earned every cent they paid him. He had a good contract, and then, because of the injuries, he couldn't contribute in his second year the way we thought he could and the way he thought he wanted to as well. But I think the offense will look different this year than it did a year ago. I think you'll probably see them go less 4 wide because John Brown's not there, unless they replace him in the draft or from somebody on the roster with that 4-3, that deep blazing speed to take the lid off everything. You might see him go with a guy like Isaiah Hodgins or a Duke Williams, who, to give you size, a big guy. That would change the complexion of it and be a different kind of matchup for defenses to consider rather than the speed matchup.
I think it'll be very interesting to see what the identity of the receiving core will be. It has been, to a great degree, speed and elusiveness, especially last year. Next year, yes, it could very well be size as the identifying factor in this receiving core. Obviously, you're not looking at Cole Beasley and Stephon Diggs for that.
Right.
But Jake Kummerow goes about 6'5". Isaiah Hodgins goes 6'3". Gabe Davis goes 6'2". Duke Williams goes 6'3". So suddenly there is a size quotient there that is pretty formidable. Now, you say, oh, what do we do for a deep threat? John Brown's not here anymore. John Brown in his 2 seasons with the Bills averaged 14.5 yards per reception. Pretty good. Gabriel Davis last season averaged almost 18 yards a catch.
Right.
sneaky way of getting behind defenses. He is a sneaky receiver, I think, and I believe he's the odds-on favorite, at least as the roster stands now, to be the third wideout in this offense. But if they don't add in free agency, yes, I agree with you. They could be almost exclusively 11 personnel.
Right.
And does that mean a larger role for Dawson Knox, or do they go out and get a tight end? Because as we know, Brandon Beane said in his season-ending press conference, he felt the tight ends had an up-and-down season, and it's a position they want to take a look at, which reading between the lines says they want to upgrade the position. Now, do they want to do that with an all-around tight end, knowing there's still the chance that Lee Smith may retire? He's contemplating retirement with a year left on his contract. So those are things to consider. And then the other thing, Steve, you talk all the time on our daily show on One Bills Live about how the offensive line has 5 of their 9 players who are currently not under contract right now. They have expiring contracts. The wide receiving core, with John Brown released, Andre Roberts' contract up, Isaiah McKenzie's contract up, 3 of the 6 guys you dressed every Sunday, half of them are now suddenly not on this roster either.
Right.
You get Isaiah Hodgins. He's kind of a bonus after taking a redshirt year last year with the shoulder injury.
Yeah.
And Jay Kumaro, I think people are excited about, including the people in this building.
Yeah.
But
He's really tall, yeah.
Yeah,
He's-
but I tend to think that if you don't replace your return, or you don't have your return man come back in Andre Roberts, they may look late in the draft for a return specialist type wide receiver that has a chance to make the roster in their estimation. And then I wouldn't be surprised if they go for some kind of bargain player on a 1-year deal, just as veteran insurance at the position. Gabriel Davis is your 3. But if you want to go 4 wide, is it Isaiah Hodgins, or do you need some veteran to come in to provide competition? I think you need a veteran to come in and provide competition. And if you want to add a little bit more speed to the group, maybe somebody like a John Ross, for example, a guy who's had an injury history, which causes some concern, but in a part-time role
could stay healthy.
is
enough
not
to
as
play,
big a risk, could stay healthy, and shouldn't come at a big price, and can take the top off a defense after running a 4.2 at the combine as a rookie.
Right. And that's what the decisions they'll make during training camp. They'll see who's going to give us the best chance, and who Josh likes to throw to as well. Don't discount that. Quarterbacks have a say in that, what that receiving core looks like. You get a guy like Isaiah Hodgins out there, let's see what he looks like. But the reason Duke Williams can't get on the field, and in my mind, the only reason Duke Williams doesn't get on the field is his speed. He just is not fast enough. And
he's a post-up guy.
He's a post-up guy, but he runs pretty good routes, and he's strong on the ball, catches the ball well
good
enough.
In contested situations.
He's great in contested catches. So you're looking for a guy to step up. Isaiah Hodgins, we don't know what he looks like.
Well,
you
if
don't
you watch his
know.
college tape, he's very exciting because, and we should note this, because I'm just going to peer into the crystal ball here. This guy is your future slot receiver. When Cole Beasley's career is over, this is the guy that will replace him, because when he worked out of the slot at Oregon State, he was very successful. He is a separator, not a speed guy. Mm-hmm. He is really good at selling feints and fakes and stuff and getting defensive backs off balance, and that's how he creates separation consistently. I mean, I have not seen double moves from a college prospect as effectively as he executes them, and I think that's what's so appealing about him. I think 3 years from now, that's your starting, maybe sooner, because we know Cole Beasley's entering the final year of his deal. But 2 or 3 years from now, provided he comes on like they think he will, that's your future
and he'll
slot
be
guy.
much different, too, because he's really tall.
Yeah,
And
6'3".
A tall guy in the slot. The only and if he's good and get separation, that's great. The only thing that may be different for him at this level is the release, getting off the line of scrimmage with a guy.
And
in
with
his
a big
face.
frame,
With a
guys
big
can
frame,
get into him, right?
There's a lot of contact, stuff. So you have to learn how to get a release in tight spaces on some really good athletes. That's the only thing probably Isaiah Hodgins that would concern me, that I would want to look for as a coaching staff. There's nothing that says they can't run double slot and go 4 wide with Isaiah Hodgins and put him in and put Gabe Davis where he was last year, outside of John Brown or outside of Cole Beasley. That's interesting to me as well. I wouldn't say it's a glaring, screaming need because
Not
of
like
the
offensive line.
Isaiah, because they got 3 guys that are really good already: Beasley, Diggs, and Davis.
Your depth is compromised.
And Hodgins, well, we'll see what they think. Kumaro is a guy they plugged Kumaro in ahead of Duke Williams last year in the Denver game. He came in, caught the
he
touchdown.
runs better.
Right.
He runs really well for a big man.
And he's really tall.
He's like almost
Kumaro's
6'6".
6'5". I mean, he's long. So that's a problem for guys. When you step up and you're going to match up on a guy and you get out there and face up on him on a press coverage and you see the guy that's, it's a power forward, you're not quite so confident. That's an issue. And that's an issue for coaches as well on the opposing team. They don't want certain guys matching up with that. So Kumaro's got some cachet just because of his gifts, as does Hodgins and as does Duke Williams. But the one thing none of those guys displays is a take the lid off, hey, we got to back off this guy because he's going to outrun me if I'm up there too close.
Right.
They don't have that anymore without John Brown.
But right after protecting Josh Allen, who is your linchpin and the biggest reason why your offense took the giant leap that it did in 2020, beyond protecting him, the next most important thing is making sure he's got enough reliable targets out there running around that he can throw the ball to. With the identity of this offense, I mean, you got to think about this, Steve. They dressed 6 receivers every single week of the season, which is the first time this franchise has done that, maybe ever.
The bottom 2 receivers, one was Andre Roberts, elite Pro Bowl decision maker at the return guy, great player. That's one of those receivers. Really rarely took snaps at wide receiver. Took some, handful, but never more than a handful in a game.
Right.
And then Isaiah McKenzie, who is the gadget guy.
Right.
You put him in there, and you want the defense to respect his speed, and he's got one of those guys where you're handing him the ball or tossing him the ball and those cross rounds.
Stretch the field horizontally.
All of that stuff. You rarely remember seeing him catch the ball down the field, except maybe in Week 17 where they actually threw it to him. So it's the top 4 guys that were really the engine of the wide receiver room. And that was John Brown is now not there. That's the hole you got to fill.
Right. And Isaiah McKenzie this week on Good Morning Football in an appearance said he would like to be back, but it was clear he didn't want to say very much about it. He said he's going to let his agent handle it and let him help make the decision for him, which I found very interesting because I think too often players forget they're the boss. They should be telling the agent what they want, not completely leaving it to their agent's devices. And, the agent probably understands the best way to get you the most money. And the money's important, but you also got to be happy going to work every day.
The bottom line is this. If you're leaving it up to your agent, it's because you don't care where you play.
Maybe.
And
for a guy like him, it's a little harder because he's a fringe roster player.
He hasn't made generational money.
Right. He's a fringe roster player, so he's looking to make as much money as he can while he's in this thing.
That's right. It's more intriguing for me to think back to the Kyle Long interview we just did. I'm thinking
I like that
Chris
guy.
Long and Kyle Long is a guy like John Feliciano. He's got grit.
And I'm telling you, he is a freakish athlete for a man his size.
He's an animal. I like him.
Hall of
down
Fame
inside.
Hall of Fame bloodlines don't hurt.
I like him down inside as a guard, and for him coming back,
Isn't
he's
he
32-year-old. Give him a 1-year deal.
Quintessential 1-year deal guy.
He wants to get back in the league. He's off the radar. Bring the guy and let him compete because that would speak to him. And lace a contract with incentives, whatever you want. I like him a lot.
Yeah.
So we'll see.
We're officially members of the Kyle Long to the Bills fan club in free agency. So we'll see. We planted the seed. We'll see if Chris waters it and nurtures it to help, kind of get the Bills. I'm sure the Bills are on the radar. And Chris even said, he should look at Buffalo. They're a winning organization. He wants to win.
He'd love it here.
He's ring chasing just like his brother was.
$4 million laced with incentives. You could maybe double it or almost double it. Go to $7 million on a 1-year deal, and you'd have a $4 million cap hit. And you just may get a guy that starts 17 games for you. That's
low risk, high reward.
Yeah.
That's what that is.
I
3-time Pro Bowl guard,
I
man.
love that. I love that signing.
Yeah, we'll see if it happens. We'll keep our ear to the ground on that. That is all the time we have for this week. We thank you for joining us here on One Bills Lite. and remind you to subscribe on whatever podcast platform you use so that way you know when the next episode drops. And remember, when there isn't enough time for our daily show, One Bills Live, there's always enough time for One Bills Lite. For Steve Tasker, I'm Chris Brown. We'll see you next time, everybody.